Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Safety, Personal Security, and Vigilance. We're going to be taking a deep dive into applying operational risk and management processes to your agency, looking at some of those vulnerabilities and risks out there and identifying those. We have a great lineup of information coming for you this morning, so I'm going to try to move along quickly here to be able to get this going. A little bit about IAPE. So IAPE came to us a while back, talked about doing these joint trainings for you, these free trainings. A lot of the trainings that they've been doing are ones that they offer in their classes. Many of them are more in depth than the hour that we'll cover. This actually one today is actually something that they don't currently address heavily in their classes, but something they're looking to add. So this is going to be new to everyone, and we're very excited to provide this training on this morning, and even better to provide it free for you, just where the state of the world is at. We really want to help you be able to do things well and to really be able to help you in your property rooms and beyond that. So a little bit about IAPE. They have actually been teaching property and evidence management classes since 1993. They've instructed well over 25,000 property room professionals across all the United States and most of the provinces of Canada. And their goal as a training organization is to be able to ensure that anyone who works in the property room, whether it's a supervisor, a manager, or is dealing with any type of evidence at all, really understands those complexities, those nuances, liabilities, and risks that are associated with managing property and evidence. You'd be surprised how often this is not seen as important as it should be, and this is some of the things they really help people understand what's out there and what's needed to be able to run a property room with efficiency and reduce those liabilities. They also offer a certification program. So if you're looking for certification, they provide that along with accreditation. So something to look into. If you've never been to an IAP class, I highly recommend it. They also have online training. You prefer that. It's an online training versus a live in-person one. And based on the state of the world, I know that's better for many people. And so that's available too. So you can go to IAPE.org to be able to get more information on that. A little bit about us. We are a platform solution provider. We provide software and technology to be able to manage not only evidence, but assets, quartermaster, personal records, and much more. What I want to focus on today, just briefly, is we have just implemented a new evidence management platform. And this goal of this platform is to provide all-encompassing efficiency and confidence and integrity in managing your evidence and being able to actually serve the public through it, and not just managing it, but for all the stakeholders that deal with evidence. So it could even be your chief being able to get the information and stats that he might need, or getting that for him quickly, and just so much more beyond that. But what's new about this is we're now offering this at a low monthly subscription price. We know the state of the world and where things are at with budgets, and we really wanted to pivot our company and what we provide in something that is more affordable. We know barrier to entry and costs are super important, so we're doing this now where there's a very low implementation fee, and you can actually own this for a very low price per month. So what's included? What is this platform, you're probably asking? Well, what it is, it's an evidence management platform, and it includes all of the following: your evidence management, your digital evidence management, and your found drop or your found property, being able to associate, excuse me, being able to associate that property back to the owners and being able to help them identify property that may be missing. I can't go into great detail here, but you can see that it includes all of the modules. These modules, these separate little entities that used to be separate, are now included. You get everything. You get all of your maintenance support. You get ongoing training. We have a team of former law enforcement that provide training whenever you need it, and we schedule that out. All of your hardware is guaranteed. So if something fails, a barcode scanner, a printer, or whatever you're using that you've purchased through us, it's warranted for life. And then all of your ongoing upgrades. So you don't no longer have to pay for upgrades in the future. You just get them. When they come out, they're implemented, and you now get them. And one of the biggies is we often know that people have a RMS system. And you may be using an RMS system, maybe an RMS evidence module, but you're not happy with that module, or you feel limited by it. We can now integrate our solutions, all of these entities, into your RMS, so that information is now being shared with your RMS, or what you need being shared, and that's included in this product. And just one more thing to note here: the evidence, the digital, and the found drop, they can either work as standalones, or they are by default naturally integrated together to work together as one solution versus separate software solutions. They all tie together. And you're probably hard to explain how this all works. So what we're doing now on the 16th, next week, we're offering a webinar to show you exactly how this functions, how it benefits you, how it benefits the public, how it benefits administrators, the district attorneys, and so much more. So if you want to see it, we're providing a question at the end of this. If you're interested, just say yes, I'd like more information and attend this webinar. We'll send you an invite. We're limiting invitations to keep the class a little more intimate. So we can get more questions answered and address those questions live and in person online. Okay, so for the webinar today, you are currently muted, but we know that you're going to have questions during this webinar. So through the GoToWebinar control panel, you can submit those questions at any time. We're going to do our best to address those because we have a team here today that's going to be taking those questions from you. So they're going to do their best to answer these. If there's any questions that are a little more challenging or a little more in depth that they can't answer through the questions tab, we'll capture those and reply to you via email or even potentially a phone call if that's required. I'd like to present Bob Martin today. He's actually going to be the one that's presenting today for us. We're just grateful to have Bob with us. He's actually an evidence manager for the Volusia Sheriff's Office in Daytona Beach, Florida. He currently serves on the IEP Board of Directors and on the NIST NIJ Evidence Management Project Steering Committee. He's a retired lieutenant from the Semolia County Sheriff's Office, where he's oversaw Diversified Integration Services Division. His experience in risk management and threat mitigation also comes from experience from a Navy intelligence specialist and a threat analyst. He was deployed 3 times after 9/11, 2001. He was the first by the Navy Criminal Investigation Service, or the NCIS, to CENTCOM forwarded to Bahrain at the time, just the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. There, he was assigned to complete threat and vulnerability assessments to protect Navy and Marine Corps assets throughout the Middle East. And due to the extreme high threat environment that was there, he briefed deploying units on personal safety habits as part of the required anti-terrorism force protection training. And then when he returned to law enforcement career and he was back home, he was reassigned to the intelligence unit as a sergeant and oversaw vulnerabilities assessments on schools and other critical infrastructures in his jurisdiction. He was also a member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force and helped lead the agency's response to emerging threats in post 9/11 environment. After he retired from law enforcement in 2009, he deployed again and returned to take a job as a contractor, working as a regional desk officer on the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon and a country analyst for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So needless to say, Bob is very experienced, has a great amount of time and experience with this, and is going to be able to share a wealth of information with us this morning. So Bob, if you're out there, I would like to pass this off to you and get your part rolling.
Thank you, sir. And good afternoon or good morning, wherever you happen to be in the country. He's done a fantastic job on the introduction, way detailed. It brought a tear to my eye, Craig. Thank you.
My pleasure, sir. You're worth it.
All righty. So we've got a lot to talk about today, so we're going to move right along. We can skip the slides on background and all of that because that's been handled. I will be drawing on my experience from the military side and intel work that I've done over the years, and as well as what I did for the sheriff's office in Seminole County. That's where I retired from, as a post 9/11 analyst and sergeant, doing various things that we had to do to protect the community and keep up on emerging threats. The first thing we're going to talk about today is operational risk management. This is a tool that we used in the military to plan operations. It could be a mundane operation like moving a convoy all the way up to combat ops, but ORM is interwoven in all of those scenarios as a tool that we use to manage risk. You cannot go to combat without risk, and you cannot do a lot of operations without experiencing risk. So we're going to talk about a tool that we can use to help us in planning, mitigating risk, and we'll apply it to property room and evidence section scenarios. So I'm looking forward for that conversation. We'll talk about some safety issues and trends right now in the property room. In fact, we'll apply the ORM model to address one of those issues, and we're just going to pick one so we can give you an example of how to apply it. Next, we're going to talk about the personal security threat environment, and that's things going on in the world. Everybody can watch the news, and you can see that the threat environment is changing. It's often regional, and we've got to continuously pay attention to those things. We'll have some things that we've noticed that are going on. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is personal safety and vigilance in an effort to mitigate risk to ourselves. So all of this is about risk management. And with that, let's go forward. As I just said, risk is inherent to all tasks and operations. There's nothing that we can do or that we do in law enforcement or in a property room that doesn't have inherent risk. And this process, it was invented to reduce casualties in battle, but in an evidence section, these risks associated with completing our everyday tasks, it goes beyond safety, although it's certainly included, but extends to how evidence being handled could affect the outcome of a prosecution or expose an agency to liability. The term operational risk management is defined as a continual cyclical process which includes risk assessment, risk decision making, and implementation of risk controls, which results in acceptance, mitigation, or avoidance of risk. So ORM is the oversight of operational risk. And it does include the risk of loss resulting from inadequate or failed internal processes and systems, human factors, or external events. So unlike other types of risk, like market risk, credit risk, in most businesses, operational risk has rarely been considered strategically significant by senior management in a lot of places. So what is this tool that we're going to talk about? I want to talk about identifying hazards being the most important part of the process, assessing hazards, making risk decisions, implementing controls, and then supervising and reviewing. The 5 steps are broken down by process or station. You can apply it to various processes within your property room, and you break those down by, like I said, by task or by process, and then you do these risk assessments. And again, the most important thing is identifying hazards. So let's talk about how we do that to start with. First of all, a hazard, you can see the definition there, but it usually involves the potential for injury, death, or property damage. And then additionally, in the case of law enforcement, it could adversely impact a prosecution or cause liability for the agency. And hazard identification is then the most important part of the ORM process, because if a hazard isn't recognized, controls may not be implemented. So you don't want to go with this step alone. You want to have somebody else. 2 heads are better than 1, 4 better than 2. Have a working group that you trust that can think through processes and identify risks and threats and hazards as you go through. So it's best accomplished together, not trying to do it by yourself. And again, you start by just breaking up your property room processes, break it down by station or task, and then you can go about using the tool to address risk. The second step is assessing the hazards. Now, we use a matrix to do that. The result of a risk assessment is a prioritized list of hazards, and which ensures that controls are first identified for the most serious threat to the mission or task. And then probability can be determined by assessing the worst case, the best case, and the most likely result of the scenario. So the more controls that you have, the further the pendulum swings to the best case scenario. You can see in the example on the screen that we've got these 4 categories of mishap probability. How often do you expect something to happen? So this is kind of attached to the number of times that you might face such a risk. The next step of assessing the hazard is what's the severity of that risk? So is it catastrophic, which could result in death, permanent total disability, a loss exceeding $1 million, or irreversible severe environmental damage? Or could it be you compromising a high-profile homicide case or something to that effect? So you create your own matrix with appropriate categories as you're doing this. In law enforcement, we may not have $1 million piece of equipment like the military does that would be a huge catastrophic result or mishap, but we do expose ourselves to liability and lawsuits. So you kind of look at, well, what am I exposing myself to, based on the situation here, maybe liability-wise. But you assess the hazards by getting that prioritized list, which ensures that controls are identified for the most serious threat to the mission or task accomplishment. And probability, it can be determined by assessing those worst case, best case, and most likely. So you want to kind of put those things together, and we come up with a matrix. And this matrix helps you to identify where you are on the risk. Now, this is done before you implement any controls. The idea is to implement controls that bring those numbers way down. That's the goal. So you want to, implement controls and make risk decisions. Is it something that we want to continue doing the way we're doing it? Do we really need to implement? Can we implement enough controls to make it worth the risk? And you have to apply these 4 principles of operational risk management when making risk decisions. First of all, you don't accept risk that's unnecessary. You accept risk when the benefits outweigh the cost. I mean, we can't not operate, so the benefit is we have to continue to operate and provide the services, so there are going to be some risks, but we don't want to accept unnecessary risk. And sometimes we can just put a stop to something. But we have to anticipate and manage risk by planning and preparing. See, you have to have somebody also that's going to ultimately make that final decision, and who's going to push the button and say, okay, we're going to go forward, and this is how we're going to approve this process or approve this policy. And by the way, this tool is used to help develop policy, whether it's SOP, standard operating procedures on a local level, or a more isolated level, or whether it's top-down policy in a general order or a high-level written directive. You can apply this model to help construct your policy as a control and to help you to minimize risk, even though sometimes you have to accept some risk. So that person that's making the risk decision, he decides if the controls are sufficient, or she decides if the controls are efficient and acceptable, whether to accept the resulting residual risk. And if it's determined the risk level is too high, maybe the development of additional or alternate controls, modifications, changes, or even rejecting the course of action may become necessary. So now we've got our risk assessment kind of completed and decided we've got to move forward. So we want to implement controls to try to eliminate risk if possible. You want to try to get to implement enough controls that you eliminate risk. You can see some of the examples here of controls that we put in. Somebody's wearing PPE. Somebody's going aloft in a lift, and they're required to wear a helmet and be attached to the machinery before they go aloft. Even our packaging requirements can be considered a control. Look at the difference. Now, that one there on the left with the poking through knife, that actually was a submitted piece of evidence at an agency, and it did cause an injury to an evidence tech. The one on the right, obvious, is the better way to do things. So when we put packaging requirements in, we're also implementing these type of controls. So when we implement controls, the communication of those controls, the training, and enforcing the use of control measures, it's critical to reducing the risk, because you can have all the rules in the world, but if they're not enforced, the risk isn't reduced. So we have to make sure people are trained, know how to do the controls that we're telling them to do, communicate the seriousness of it and the result if you don't do what you're told to do. But you have to make sure that people are aware and are doing what it is. And once the risk control decisions are made, the next step to implementation is exactly that. Clearly communicated to all the involved personnel, accountability is established, and necessary support is provided. Training is one of the most important controls you have, and the more you can have, the more risk is mitigated. So make sure people understand. It's also important to document each step of the risk management process, and that includes the training and communication that went along with it, because when we're talking about liability as a hazard, we have to have documentation to show that. So the last thing, the last in the step is to supervise and review and adjust. And it really does involve 3 actions: monitoring the effectiveness of your risk controls, and determining the need for further assessment of all or a portion of the mission or task due to an unanticipated change, and capturing the lessons learned, both positive and negative. The best laid plans can go awry, and it's important that you can make adjustments as you're operating sometimes. If we do a good risk assessment for an operation that we're about to undertake, let's say in the evidence room, it would be maybe doing a burn, and you've got to travel to dispose of your drugs and guns or whatever it is you're going to be transporting. But how do you control that from beginning to end to make sure you're destroying the things you're supposed to, that you do it safely, that you do it legally, that you have safety controls in? And one particular one that just comes to mind off the top of my head is we don't advertise when we're going to do it, so that it's done kind of in secret, and nobody could create an operation against us to try to steal while we're doing that, since we're outside of the control of our building when we're transporting these kind of things. So just another example of a task or something you can manage through this. Now, there are 3 levels to operational risk management. The in-depth level is very strategic, very high-level policy, like general orders and directive. So it takes time to do an in-depth, thorough research and analysis of available data, use of diagrams and analysis tools, formal testing or long-term tracking of associated hazards are some of the tools used at this level. Other examples of application of ORM at the in-depth level include long-term planning of complex or, say, contingency operations. What happens when the hurricane comes here in Florida? Technical standards and system hazard management applied in engineering design during acquisition and introduction of new equipment and systems. We had to do that when we started to use forklifts internally and using people lifts, and make sure that we had all of the controls that we needed that they could operate these pieces of equipment safety. Also the development of tactics and training curriculum and major system overhaul or repair if necessary. So that in-depth level, you have plenty of time to do. There's no time constraints on that. It's and I misspelled constraints in my slide, but there are no time constraints to that. You usually have plenty of time to plan. And what the difference is at the deliberate level is the time frame is moved down. Now we've got an operation coming here in Daytona. And let's say maybe we're going to do the Daytona 500 is coming, and we've got to do an operation. So that's at the deliberate level. It's going to be a mission plan and operational plan. So we do deliberate planning at the standard operating procedure level in the evidence section. The how we do our operations from day to day, we use deliberate planning to make sure we're putting things in the right order and the processes are correct, that we are keeping safety and case integrity in all of the things that we do. So there is a window of time usually assigned to that. And when you get a task, you're going to change something, you want to get it out because a change is obviously needed and you don't want to sit back on it. So we do that at the deliberate level, and we still go through similar processes. And the last is time critical. It's tactical level adjustments. And this is kind of what we apply in our everyday life. If you think about it, as things change, you apply this without even thinking about it. And we're talking about doing this on a formal level, but a lot of times we do ORM even subconsciously. So how we do this is we apply basically an ABCD. First is assess. That's the A. Assess what's going on and what your role is. It's about achieving and maintaining good situational awareness. You'll have likely received the brief, which laid out the plan and should have identified the hazards and the associated risk and controls to be used. But sometimes things just don't go the way we had planned, and you're going to have to make a course correction. So you've got to be constantly assessing the situation. You've got to balance resources. If you have to have a couple of people to do something safely, it's going to take away from another. So you really need to balance what you have available to you and draw on that. Developed the alternate resources that can be developed during the in-depth and deliberate planning. They include publications, checklists, techniques, tactics, and procedures, or TTPs. If you're from a military background, you understand what those are. And then equipment. And additionally, they can be your teammates or others supporting the operation. So you have to balance them and continue to operate and make adjustments to see to the success of the mission and everything else going on at the same time. We do that every day. When nothing, we come in planning our work every day, but nothing ever goes as planned, and I'm sure you can relate to that. We have to have effective communication so that we know how things are changing, and when changes are being made, we have to communicate that. Then we have to get feedback from those implementing parts of the operation to make sure that the plan is working out the way it should, and that we're getting feedback and see if any decisions or adjustments need to be made. And last is the debrief. First, that's the D. And first and foremost, we have a mission to complete. So after we do that, we want to continue to plan for the next thing. So what I've just given you is a very fast snapshot of the tool of ORM in your handouts that you can get on this presentation. Some of these are kind of broken down for you, and maybe you can use that for some of your operational planning. So Craig, I think we're up to our first poll question next.
Okay.
And you can take that part.
All right, great. I will do that. I'm going to launch a poll for everyone that's here. And through that, through the GoToWebinar interface, you can actually interact with that poll. So I'm going to bring that up for everyone on the screen. And the question is, does your agency train on or utilize formal process for making risk decisions in everyday operations? So give your best answers here, and then I'll share those results with everyone when it's done. So it looks like we're about 40% of you have polled in. I know some of you are probably thinking about it, discussing it. Let it go just a little bit longer here. About 60% of you. I'll go another few seconds here, and then I'm going to go ahead and share those results with everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close out that poll now. And I'm going to share those results. So it looks like, well, we got about almost a split on the yes and no's there. 34, it's like a third of everything. So yes, 34%, no, 32%. And yes, it does for special operations only, is 34%. So very interesting results, actually. Okay, I'm going to hide those results, Bo. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay. We're going to move on to part 2, which was safety and trending issues. And we're going to identify one here in just a second to kind of use the ORM process to address. So first, we'll talk about fentanyl and other dangerous substances. We're still talking about fentanyl. That hasn't changed. The threat is still there, but it is kind of evolving. And we got a bulletin yesterday I'll talk about. We'll talk about COVID. That's the big one. And we'll then talk about personal security. That kind of moves into sections 3 and 4 for us there. So first of all, we received, I went too far, one more. We received just this week a thing from the Gulf Coast HIDA here in Florida. Purple heroin, also known as perp and purple, it's a deadly combination of potent illicit opioids. A non-fentanyl synthetic is also being used in there, but there are other components, and it gets different mixes, and this is kind of an evolving thing. We just kind of put that out yesterday as a safety brief to folks, because as you notice, some of the components, when they combine them, it still includes fentanyl, carfentanil, you know, some of the things that we're concerned about it potentially being weaponized or used against us. So fentanyl is, again, still one of the most serious things. Again, this event that we're starting to see could be headed toward a trend. You know, in IPE training, we always talk about events and trends, and paying attention to events. And when we start to get more, we start to see trends develop. The overdoses haven't slowed down. In fact, they've gotten worse, and we still have this epidemic of opioid abuse. So you recognize the need for PPE. You recognize that overdoses are climbing through the roof, and we want to make sure that we address this safely. Now, we're going to be taking a lot of this stuff in, and you have to address the issue. You can't. This is one of those risk decisions that you have to make. Are you going to be accepting these type of drugs into your evidence section? Well, you're not going to have much of a choice in most places. So maybe we can apply ORM to solving that problem. So let's say we're writing the policies at the deliberate level, the standard operating procedure level of what we're going to do with this stuff when it comes in. You know, step 1 is identifying hazards. So the process that we're talking about is the intake of evidence. That's the overarching process we're talking about. And one of the tasks of intaking evidence is checking lockers, and then are there hazards that go with that task? Identify those hazards. One of the hazards are dangerous substances being submitted. And then again, one of those substances that could be submitted we find dangerous is the submission of fentanyl. So as we identify that, we want to kind of put an assessment together and apply the matrix. So what is the associated degree of risk considering probability and severity? If the severity level unmitigated for let's say you're exposed to carfentanil or fentanyl in a significant dose, is death possible? And maybe you want to say unmitigated, it is catastrophic. The probability level, if it's unmitigated, what is it? Is it B, maybe, likely, or is it also a 1 in critical? You have to make that determination based on how much of that's coming in, how often you see this. So it's important as you apply this that it has to apply to your particular situation. What I assess in my own property room may not be what you're facing because of the amount, the type, and the frequency of which you're handling this stuff. But you can still use the process for that. Next, you're going to make risk decisions. The key element of the risk decision, is it acceptable and necessary? Let's face it, some agencies, they actually stopped field testing all fentanyl and required it to be submitted for testing. When fentanyl was first coming out and it was a big hazard, and we're starting to be made aware of it, some agencies, they just stopped field testing that altogether. Others did not. They made the decision that the risk wasn't acceptable, so they stopped that practice and that task. Some agencies stopped field testing. Others decided the risk was acceptable because PC arrest couldn't be possible with that, and so we had to implement controls to maybe be able to do that safer. So that's how we make the risk decisions on what we're going to do. Then you got to implement controls. What are you going to do about it? Will you field test? If you do, where and how? Are you going to do it in the open air on a patrol car or in a fume hood? What are you going to require as far as PPE goes? There are things and resources. By the way, you're going to see resources and sources that are listed as web pages here. Those are on your handouts. So if you want to go get some of this information yourself as you're developing policy and procedure, those things are available to you. So that'll be part of your handout that you can get these resources for yourself. So then you have to train. We talked about the training part. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to clarify too, handouts are located in your GoToWebinar control panel. There's a PDF you can download in case people are looking for. I just want to let people know that.
Yeah, very well. Thank you, sir. So just to don and doff PPE, people need to be trained on how to do that. How are you going to package it? Are you going to test? Where are you going to do it? Are you going to implement a fume hood? Are you going to let people use the fume hood without PPE? I would suggest you do not. Are you going to train them how to decontaminate it? There's a whole list of things you've got to kind of think through when you've identified a hazard and you're putting in controls and what you're trying to accomplish and what you're going to allow. But there's a lot of questions here, and that's the intent of this whole presentation. It's just to get you to ask the questions. Are we handling things right? And if it prompts that thought, prompts that discussion, then I think we're being successful in what we're trying to put out today. The submission of it, is it going to be in a general locker? I know one agency, in fact ours does too, we have a special locker for suspected fentanyl. I would say pills, powders, and capsules would be the best thing to put into those lockers so that your evidence technicians know that those lockers, when you open them up, they're going to be wearing their PPE because it's going to have these potential things in there. So are you going to make them wear the PPE? Are you going to put it in another piece of plastic convenience package for safety and storage so you can handle it without the gloves on? How about decontamination of the locker, the cart, and the things, and how are you going to dispose of your PPE? You've got to think through all of those processes, put the rules in place. And then after that, what happens if, or do you have a contingency plan for what happens if an exposure occurs? In our drop-off locker room at our agency, we have the fume hood available for the deputies. There's PPE available for the deputies to use. There is Narcan available in that area, and there is an AED that's available there. And we also want to make sure that somebody's standing by to do something if an exposure occurs. And I know the last agency I worked in, if they're going to use the fume hood and do those things, that there would be a secondary person there to render aid if necessary. So step 5 of the handling fentanyl, you're going to supervise and review. And after you implement your controls, see where you are on the matrix and see if you've knocked it down to an acceptable level. Make sure that people are adhering to the policy. Is additional training or retraining going to be necessary? Make sure personnel don't become lazy and slack off. That's the biggest thing about safety issues. It is never convenient to do things the safest that you can do them. So shortcuts are always taken. So it's impossible to mitigate the threats when we don't take them seriously enough. We can tell that with even our response to COVID-19. It could be a threat internal as much as external, and there's some recommended ideas there from the CDC, but you've got to know that the longer it goes on and it hasn't affected certain people, well, then we consider it not a threat anymore until it becomes one again, and that's with every safety issue. And I'm not trying to make this and this is certainly not a political statement or anything, because people, what we should be doing about COVID is a huge topic of concern. But we're talking about in an occupational hazard realm when we're addressing this, and we have to consider those things when we're applying, say, ORM to this. So we want to look at different resources to kind of figure out how we're going to make our environment safer, and the 3 C's seem to apply and have been pretty effective in our workplace. So we consistently evaluate that and make sure that we can do the things that we need to do without exposing people to additional risk. Some more ideas from the World Health Organization. Again, these things are kind of in your outline. I think some of them are, so that you can have these ideas when you go back. Decontamination is one of those things where public is touching and handling and spending a lot of time. Like our lobby, for instance. We've increased our cleaning protocols to, we used to only have our cleaning guy come in once a day. Since COVID, it's a daily thing. So there's always things we can do safer, and this is just one, again, an emerging thing that we had to adjust to and will continue to adjust to. So that brings us to the next poll question, Craig. Next 2, actually.
Yes, next 2. We'll do 2 back-to-back, so same as before. I'm going to pull this poll question up for everyone, and people can interact with it. Has your agency made significant changes in operations or working environment or conditions as a result of COVID-19? And we'll just let everybody pull in. We're about 25% of you have. And they're coming in hot and fast here. So we're about 60% now. Let a few more of you respond. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share those results with everyone. So I'm going to close that poll out and share those results. So it looks like yes to both, 78%. So a lot of people are being very proactive, which is good to see. And then no to both is 8%. And then yes, we have made significant changes to our work, which is 9%. Yes, we have made significant changes to our operations is 4%. But 78% said yes to both. So that's great. And then I will go right into the next poll here. I'm going to launch that for everyone. And it says, did your agency use a threat assessment process to make those decisions? Be very curious how you decided to look at that and how you decided to make that decision. So very interesting. We're about 60% now. I'll let some more of you that are wanting to pull in here do so. I know some of you discussing this. Like, how did we do this? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share those results with everyone. So I'm going to close this poll out and I'm going to share results. And it looks like 28% did, 50% no, 15% no, and 58% they don't know. They don't know how they came about it. So interesting. All right, Bob, back to you.
Okay, so moving straight into part 3 here, and we're going to go through some of these stories pretty fast. Just an example of what the threat environment is right now. I know I don't have to belabor this to law enforcement professionals. The threat environment is considerable right now, and it is a lot of times regional. But we also have to be prepared for things that might happen, not just at our offices, but what might happen at our homes. This particular article I'm sharing right now was a Wauwatosa police officer. He went home. He was targeted by a group of people. There were like 50 to 60 people there, and they targeted his home for vandalism. You can see toilet paper and some things there. He tried to establish a dialogue with them, but he was physically assaulted, and he retreated inside. They approached his back door. A single shotgun round was discharged by a member of the group into the back door. So these events are now in certain places becoming even more serious to our families, as well as what we do, during our own business hours.
Horrifying assault caught on camera. An LAPD officer attacked the police station.
The heart-pounding video shows the life and death struggle that took place Saturday night. Eyewitness News reporter Eileen Frere joins us.
So I didn't play the long video of that, but what ended up happening was another officer came in. The guy did have his gun. He had his gun taken from him. The bad guy, as he was retreating out, pointing the gun at the officer's chest that was struggling there, was confronted by another officer coming in. He shot at her, and she ducked for cover. And then a third officer came, and apparently there was an exchange of gunfire. In all that, no one was hit. But you can see how things can go from bad to worse, even right here in our own police stations. And I understand these are law enforcement officers. What about us civilians? Well, we're also at a threat because we are still associated with law enforcement. So let me show you what happened to a civilian. Now, this was a couple of years ago, not even in today's threat environment.
Right outside of here, officers say they had to pull the suspect off of the dispatcher. He beat her so bad she had several fractures to her face, including a broken jaw.
It breaks my heart that somebody would do that to another human being.
Brutal photos show Barbara King after she was badly beaten while inside of the Clarksdale Police Department. Just like any other day, she was the only dispatcher on duty Wednesday morning. But on this day, police say Stacy Clark came into the department asking for property that had been left in the building.
Now, what did they just say he was asking for? Property. And, some of us are in standalone buildings. Some of us are in police stations where there are police officers that can help. And then sometimes we're occupying spaces where police officers are not. And we have to think about these things. Just a bunch of headlines here. I've copied all of these headlines for you if you need it for ammunition, as it were, or to be considered when you're making your threat assessments. But all of these things, how serious are we really taking these potential threats? And I'm hoping we do a lot. Now, Leos, we are trained. I was a law enforcement officer years. I'm a civilian now, and we were trained on how to sit in a restaurant, how to approach a traffic light, all of these different things. So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about the civilians now, just to see, are the civilians getting the information? And let's talk about some of the things that we see in the photos that I'm sharing. So how are civilians utilized in your agency? And are they insulated, or are they out in the public and exposed? Are they visually identified as representatives of law enforcement agency when they're not insulated? Are we training them what law enforcement has learned? Are we sharing with them information that can help them be more prepared? Or is intelligence simply for the sworn? Notice all three of these photographs. These are civilians at work, non-insulated, out in the public. Next, so where do we begin? Well, first of all, let's start giving them some information, provide information to them. Do they have access to briefs and bulletins? How about high-profile trials or hearings when they're coming up? What are the results? Are we encouraging them to stay up on news articles, and are we including them on the briefs? We have to ask a lot of these questions, and only you can answer what's going to be appropriate in your situation and environment. But awareness of the threat environment is crucial in instilling the motivation to implement good security practice. It's incumbent upon all persons connected to law enforcement to maintain good awareness as the environment in which they travel through and work and frequent. It changes. So reading intelligence bulletins or daily briefs or even watching the news can help one maintain good awareness as to the threat environment. High-profile trials, hearings and results, events, all these things are things they need to be aware of, but it's not enough. It has to be coupled with action. So vigilance is the order of the day on most normal days. Hypervigilance is the order of the day in a higher threat environment. And understand, if you maintain hypervigilance for too long, it'll wear you out. There is absolutely a swing that takes place, so you can only maintain that for so long. And most law enforcement officers are familiar with this. They've heard the saying, keep your head on a swivel, and simply put, that means always be looking around you and assessing your surroundings. But before you even open your front door, what are you doing? Do you make it a habit to look out the window and around at the vehicle you're going to get into? Depending on your background, you may, but if it's not a habit for you, you very well may not. As a deployed military member and a career law enforcement officer, I don't even think about it anymore. I just do it. It's not something I have to consciously do. It's something I unconsciously do, and do it religiously without even thinking about it. When I exit my home every day, I'm looking around across the street, looking around and under the car, looking over my shoulder, looking to see if the gate was breached overnight, and so on. And these are not things that I even consciously think about. It's something that I've made a habit of over decades of being in the business. In a higher threat environment, keeping one's head on a swivel is vital to mitigate potential threats. It can become exhausting over an extended period of time, even detrimental, and that's why I think we're seeing a lot of issues with the lockdown and the threat of COVID, and then the situation going on around our country with demonstrations and the like. So it can become exhausting. But this is what we call Cooper's color code: the white, yellow, orange, and red. And white being you're relaxed, completely unaware. Usually you're in an insulated environment when you're like that. And yellow, it's a little bit more. You may even be in public while carrying a firearm or whatever. You're kind of in yellow. You ever notice most of the cops were sitting with our backs to the door because we know people are looking at us. And then orange, potential threat is identified and you're thinking about what to do about it. And red, it's verified and you're executing a necessary response. So that's something that we've been trained on, and not all civilians have that experience. Let's talk about you're in your car heading out for the day. Can you vary your routes and routines? Do you have a normal routine you have to adhere to, or is there a possibility of varying that routine in a higher threat environment? Are your mirrors set to see what and who is around you? Do you notice it when people are watching you? If you're in a marked vehicle or even in an unmarked, the lights can be seen through the tent, and it's a Ford Explorer or Taurus, or it's got a government tag on it, take my word for it, people are watching you and even reacting to you as you travel. You can't afford to be distracted with the juke radio, your phone, a mobile data terminal, or anything else when you're transiting in that type of vehicle in a higher threat environment. You need to pay attention to your surroundings, checking your mirrors, watching who's watching you, and being prepared to react. As you pull up to a light, do you give yourself an out by leaving some distance between you and the car ahead of you to see which direction you could escape if necessary? Is the drive-through you're going to at lunch, and is it so packed you couldn't have an out if you needed one? Are you being followed? If you are, don't stop at your house. Hypervigilance, it mandates you consider such things, but being vigilant, you can make these a habit, and it doesn't rise to the level of hypervigilance. How about as you arrive at work for the day? Is everything as it should be? Are the gates and door accesses secure? Are there vehicles that don't belong? How about on the road as you approach? Is anyone in them? Has anyone just shown up taking pictures of your facility? We worried a lot about that after 9/11. We don't pay too much attention to it now. If anything feels out of order, is it worthy of further investigation? How would you contact someone to assist if need be? Is your phone charged? Do you have a radio? Would it be possible to trap you or your vehicle or block it in if you were to continue? Maybe you should egress to a safe place and wait for assistance to check out what be amiss if you can answer yes to any of those things. In a higher threat environment, police facilities, including the one you pick evidence up at or actually work in, could become a target for demonstrations. So when possible, avoid the crowds to avoid being trapped. And if there is sufficient protection to guarantee your safe ingress or egress, well, then so be it. But if not, avoiding the crowds may be your best option. Now, how about at lunch or at work? Do you wear regalia that identifies you as being part of law enforcement? Or do you have it on the vehicles that you drive? Maybe it could be on even your civilian vehicle. When you go go to the store or maybe a restaurant, are you wearing those insignias? You know, maybe half price on a meal may not be worth the risk in a higher threat environment. You know, do your civilian vehicles espouse your connection to law enforcement? Can you tell which of those pictured above are sworn or civilian at a glance? I bet you can't. And again, when you are out in an identifiable vehicle or wearing law enforcement regalia, do you watch to see who's watching you? And I'm telling you, they do notice you. So how about when you're heading back home? What's outside your building? Is it dark outside as you're leaving the office? What's the lighting like where you park? Can you see? Is there anybody looking at you? Are others around? Can you leave together or get an escort? You have to think about these things in a higher threat environment as you're heading out, especially after daylight savings time and it's already dark by 5:30, and I never get out of here at 5:30. Heading back home, how about when you arrive and approach your house? Do you look at the environment around you? Do you take the time to get yourself together and exit your vehicle? If you take your time, that could be an opportunity for someone to approach you. So I don't suggest dilly-dallying. Get ready to get out of your car. Most civilians don't think about this. Spending that time to get your purse together or your backpack or whatever it is. All that time you're sitting there, you're vulnerable. Can you park your marked car in a garage? Can you back your unmarked car in so that the government tag isn't visible if you have one? Are you always ready for an emergency egress if necessary? Always pay attention. It may not be a good time to be talking on the cell phone. Now let's talk about something that's not so obvious. Have you ever heard of a digital footprint? And what it could be used to collect information on you for nefarious purposes. So your digital footprint is an online presence. Are your social media accounts, are they locked down enough so people couldn't make an order of battle against you and your home or your family should they decide to make you a target? And I got to tell you, targeting can be easy and adversaries will try. I had an example exercise when I was with NCIS deployed. And we were looking at how to lock down the internet to keep from being a target. And it was really simple. All I did, I acted like a jihadi that I was angry with what's going on in the world. I saw a headline that might inflame my rhetoric, and therefore that person that was making those quotes, I decided, let me see, can I target them? And I did. I couldn't get to him, but I could get to his family. And it's all open source information, and it was very easy. So you need to pay attention to what's available to who on the internet. What kind of pictures are available and public of your home, possessions, or people in your life? Have you ever tried to Google yourself, your address, or your cohabitants to see what is publicly available? As threat environments increase, you need to lock down more and more. So how controversial or confrontational are your online conversations? Is it that important to be right in a politically hostile environment? And is that post worth the risk, or would it be better to simply keep on scrolling? Remember what we're talking about here. It's not just your safety, it's the safety of your family as well. So I think that brings us to our last poll, Craig.
Okay, I'll bring up that last poll here for everyone. I'm going to launch that poll. And does your agency routinely provide training, intelligence, and/or situational awareness reports to civilians? I'm very curious here how many are doing this, and hopefully more doing it as we go forward. Okay, looks like about 60% of you have pulled in. And I'm going to let it go just a little bit longer. I know some of you may be thinking about this, so we're about 70% here. Okay, I'm going to close out that poll right now, and I will share those results with everyone. So closing the poll, and I'll share those results. So it looks like 32% said yes, they do, and 68% said they do not. So very valuable information you present here, Bob, I'm sure for everyone that has not been doing this and how important it is.
Okay.
Results.
All right, so just to wrap up, and then I think we can take a few questions. Everything discussed today was intended to simply provoke thought and discussion. It's not intended to accuse or criticize. We were just hoping everyone could see the value in applying maybe the ORM process to a myriad of problem sets, and you can likely see its application even in your personal life. We only picked up a couple of safety issues to discuss because there's so many that we deal with, but wanted to give everyone the tool to confront safety problems. That was the focus of what we were presenting at the beginning of this training today. As we transition to personal security, it really wasn't intended to strike fear or disparage anyone or any agency. Again, all the questions were, again, to provoke thought and discussion as to what may be appropriate mitigating actions in a higher threat environment. So maintaining awareness, vigilance, hypervigilance when warranted, and practicing those things which could help mitigate threats in a high threat environment. If you practice them enough, they become habits, and then it's not even considered hypervigilant anymore. So take responsibility for maintaining your own safety and that of your family. So accomplishing this may certainly require some changes in your routine, but ultimately the little sacrifices, they can pay off big dividends in thwarting a serious threat. So all of you, please be safe, keep your head on a swivel. And Craig, if you'd like to open the floor for questions, we're there.
Yes. Yeah, so I know our team has been answering many of these questions, so a lot of them, they drop off my screen here when they get answered. But if there's a question that you may have or a question you want to experience or anything that you would like to share with the group, we would be able to answer some of those now. So if you want to type them in, you can do that. And I don't know if the team has any question that you've addressed that you would like to share. You could share that now. If you have something that was asked that you answered, that would be fine too. Okay, so it looks like we've got a question here that finally came in. So it says, how do we know the gun in a sealed evidence box is not loaded?
Well, the agency's policy has to dictate how you handle that. And it may also be dictated by how your laboratory that you use handles that. I was in an agency where we had authority to open those firearms and inspect them to make sure they were safe. We had to do that with PPE on so that we wouldn't transfer evidence. That included a mask, it included gloves, so that when handling it, we had to do so gingerly so that we didn't wipe off fingerprints. But if you're going to have the authority to do that and something needs to be processed, you should probably make sure you're protecting that area to be processed by a sign or something there, and maybe take it directly hand deliver to the analyst or something to make sure that it's safe. If you're not going to do that and you're trusting your officers to do it by policy, I think once the weapon is locked down and sealed, and if you find things later that were not as reported, well, then there has to be consequences for those actions, because that's the only deterrent you're going to have. So agencies handle it in different ways, and we will take weapons sometimes with tags on them, and then we put them in boxes after the fact so that we can store it in a certain way, keep it safe in a certain way, but we can also inspect it when it comes in. But if it's going to be processed for DNA or for anything for latent prints, then it needs to be boxed and protected, and your policy is going to have to dictate that. Do a risk assessment on how many you're getting. Maybe you've got an issue. So.
Okay, great, Bob. Thank you. They're coming in quick here, the questions, so I'm going to try to get some more of these. This is similar to firearm check and processes for each agency. What about drug packaging?
So, again, it's going to be agency policy. We believe that you're going to have your drugs packed the way your lab wants it submitted. If you make that your requirement, then you're not going to have to change packaging. So however it is your lab dictates that they want the stuff packaged, that's the best way to package it. Obviously, in the threat environment we're in, pills, powders, and capsules are subject to containing dangerous substances that could harm us. So we prefer to have those in the inner package and an outer package, and we may even put it in a convenience package that we can see the evidence. We don't seal it, but we can use it to store and handle it safely. We, again, have a locker for suspicious things or for suspected fentanyl or pills, powders, or capsules, so that we can put on PPE, and we know to handle everything come out of those lockers suspiciously and make sure that we secure it, make it safe to put away, and then we take our PPE off after that, and we decontaminate the locker before we take off our PPE. So that's delineated in our procedures, and that needs to be taken care of there. So how do you package drugs? Usually the best answer is always have them package it the way that your laboratory is going to accept it.
Okay. They're coming in so quick, guys. I'm having a hard time keeping up because I know sometimes people are doing threads of things. I do want to share something from Robert. He's PowerPoint presentation, unknown powders, if other agencies are interested. Bob, you shared your information with everyone. I think what I'll do is if you're okay with that, Bob, I can send that out as a follow-up email after that goes out tomorrow for everyone if they want to contact you. Okay.
No problem.
All right. All right. And it says, is it safe to incinerate drugs? Is it safe to incinerate drugs? This is from Tiffany.
Well, it's going to depend on how you're doing it. I wouldn't dig a pit out back and light it off. That would be unsafe. But if you're using a facility that has a containment of the fumes and things, yes, there are safe ways to incinerate drugs. We incinerate ours. We use a company that has a contained incinerator that it actually takes everything that's being burned and creates energy and electricity out of it. So that's one option. There are also devices that you can purchase, burn trailers and the like. But again, I'm not sure about the environmental questions on those. So yes, there are ways to do it safely, but you need to consider what's happening with the residual once it's being lit off.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question here from Rachel. She says, on ammunition placed in evidence, we don't return it to the individual. Can we use it for training, or do we have to destroy it?
Well, that is going to be according to your policy and your law in your region. You're ultimately the decision maker, and your agency's got to make that determination for yourself. It's strictly what does the law allow, and if the law allows it, is it, even though you can do it, should you do it? That's a decision that your policymakers have to make.
Craig, this is Joe. Can I jump
great.
in on that one real quick?
Yes, please do.
One of our vendors is a Gunbuster, and they will pick up guns. This is an advertisement, but they pick up guns and destroy them for the department. And we've got a couple pictures in our presentations where that they've sent me, where a gun was used and was using reloads, and the guns have exploded. So if you're going to use that ammo for departmental use, make sure there's no reloads in there, because they can be extremely hazardous. And I think if you've been to the class, you've seen those pictures of those guns actually just exploding when they used a reload. So that's just a precautionary thing to be aware of.
Good stuff, Joe. Thank you. Another question from Rebecca. She was asking, what is the safest way to destroy fentanyl?
We incinerate it.
Okay, easy enough, straight enough. Okay. Another question here. When transporting evidence for incineration, would you advise that the process be done on a variety of days as opposed to always the same day? Also, should the route or transit be varied?
Yeah, anything you can do to vary your routine is good. It's an additional mitigating factor when doing your operational planning. I think the most important thing is that you have armed escort, and that you keep the operation to need to know only on the date, time, when, type of vehicle, all of those kind of things. Only those people who need to know those various parts of that should be told that. So whatever you can do to vary routine, to vary route, to make sure you keep good operational security on what you're doing, it's always a good thing.
Fantastic. I have another interesting question here. I think this is a good one from Annette. She says, we are building a new police department. I'm wanting lockers backing up to the evidence room. Admin is wanting lockers located in different parts of the building. What are your thoughts on where these lockers should be located?
Well, if I had my way in the property and evidence room, we'd have one place that everybody has to drop their evidence off, and that's the only place I've got to get it out. However, that's not a reality in most places. We have to travel to various district offices and gather things from lockers all over the place. Best case scenario is you don't have to go anywhere, and it's safest and to have everybody bring them to the one spot. Have your fentanyl locker, for instance, identified there, and that way you're kind of controlling the environment. The more places you got lockers, the more security you got to have around them. It can become a bit I suggest you have cameras on them and the like. And the more you have them and the more people that have access to them all the time, it's obviously not as secure. But those decisions are made above the property room most times on what the operational needs of the agency are. So you're going to get your parameters, just do the best you can within them to operate, and again, use your risk assessment tool to mitigate any potential risk wherever you've got to go pick up the lockers and pick up things from the lockers.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Craig, Joe
Another
again
question
on
from
lockers. Craig,
Yep, go ahead.
Joe. Another quick thing on lockers, the person who's building the new building, this is something, the question, it sounded like there's lockers in several places. The question would be, is that for temporary for officers to submit? I'm going to stop right there. I've seen a couple departments where they'll have a series or a set of lockers in their detective bureau. We sign things out continuously for the detectives that wants to show it to a victim or something. The worst thing we can do with that signed out evidence is have it in our personal locker, in our file cabinet, in our desk, because I'm going to challenge the chain of custody. So some departments have put small temporary lockers in their detective bureau. Each detective has his own combination lock, and if they have to keep it out overnight, they can't keep it in their file. They can't keep it in their desk or cabinet or anything. At the end of the day, they go over and put it in that temporary locker that's in the detective bureau that they are locking it with their lock. I'm going to challenge it in court if I know you've been keeping it in your file cabinet, car, etc. So again, that's a locker discussion. And if you're building a new building, and if you could put some of those in your detective bureau, it may be something you hadn't given any thought to.
Okay, thank you, Joe. That's fantastic. I'm trying to go through the questions. I know I'm skipping over some here, and I apologize, folks, for that. They're just coming in so rapidly. It's hard to keep up with keeping them in order here. I do have a question. Is there a certificate of attendance for this webinar? Can it be emailed to us for our records? Joe, you want to answer that?
Yes, give us a couple days while we get all the data that's come in, who's attended and whatnot. So if you haven't received it by next Monday, send us an email. But 99% of you will have it within a couple days.
Okay. And another question is are there any specific training programs for civilian employees? So Joe, I'll let you answer that one also.
Well, I would say historically, go back to when we started teaching this, it was all civilians. And what we've done is we've encouraged the civilians to go back home and talk to their bosses. And as you look over the years, probably a third to a half of the classes they're probably 50-50 now. And again, it's regional. You go into the Northeast, it's all cops. You go into the West Coast, it's all civilians. Bob has that down in Florida, mostly civilians. But all of our training is for those people who work in a property room, whether you carry a gun or not.
All right, excellent. I'm going to do two more questions here. Anybody that we did not get your answer to, we will follow up with those via email. One question is, any suggestions for computer and electronic destruction? This would be for the state of California. I'll let anybody who wants to speak to that.
I know for a fact that I mentioned Gunbuster. They're headquartered in St. Louis, and they will pick them up and destroy them for you if you give them your guns. And again, if you go to gunbuster.com, Gunbuster USA, I believe, but they will do metal, brass knuckles, CDs, DVDs, hard drives, etc., for no cost.
Okay, great. And then finally, I'm going to ask this question. It says, do you have any webinars planned for the future? Joe, I think you have one planned.
We do. It's a secret. No.
Yay.
We're going to
you want to keep it a secret?
January. We're going to move into January, and we have a special one towards the end of January, and we're going to have a young lady, a professor at, I believe, University of Las Vegas, and her world is rape kits. So we're going to learn everything that you can possibly think about when it comes to storage. When you think of a rape kit, what's in it? You have no idea how many different rape kits are out in the market. So she's going to talk to us about preservation, storage, everything you ever wanted to know about a rape kit.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Just let you know that we're both on Facebook and LinkedIn. Sometimes you don't get emails, so if you want to be notified about further trainings that you may miss or may get blocked by your spam, be sure to like us or connect with us on those platforms. We are there. And following this webinar here, just please, there'll be a brief survey. It's super short. Just let us know how we did. Let us know how we can improve. Let us know what your needs are. And we're going to do our best to constantly improve and take your feedback and utilize that for future training. So we appreciate
Notwithstanding
your
my
time.
IT hiccup.
Yes, yeah. Please don't look at that. That's but we recovered. So it's all good, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the 500 plus agencies that joined us today, and have a great week. Be safe out there, and we look forward to seeing you again in about a month. And if those that want to attend our webinar next week on our platform, we'd love to see you there. So let us know if you want to attend. Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone.